Jai Hind, dear children. I hope you all have studied the topics that we have discussed last week, right? So now we can just recall the topics. We have discussed the importance of transportation in different organisms, the blood vascular system in human beings, the types of blood vessels that are arteries, veins and blood capillaries, blood and its components, that is plasma, RBC, WBC and platelets and their functions, and the structure of heart. Now we can just recall the topics. They are the importance of transportation in organisms, blood vascular system in humans, types of blood vessels that are arteries, veins and blood capillaries, blood and its components, that is plasma, and the corpuscles called RBC, WBC and platelets, and the structure of heart. This is the structure of human heart. Heart consists of 4 chambers. They are right auricle, right ventricle, left auricle and left ventricle. Now, so many blood vessels are associated with this heart. Superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, aorta, pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein are the blood vessels associated with the heart, which carries blood into and out of the heart. And the auricles and ventricles, that is left auricles and ventricle and the right auricles and ventricles, are separated by 2 valves. Left side, the auricles and ventricles are separated by the bicuspid valve, and right auricle and right ventricle are separated by the tricuspid valve. So this much we have discussed in the last class, right? Now in this session we can discuss about the functioning of heart. The most vital function of heart is heartbeat, which takes place throughout one's life. There occurs sequence of events during one heartbeat. When we place a stethoscope on the chest, we can hear the heartbeat sound of heartbeat as lap-tap, lap-tap. One heartbeat involves repeated rhythmic contraction and relaxation of heart muscles. Contraction of heart muscle is called as systole and the relaxation of heart muscle is called as diastole. Now we can study how heart beats. See, heart pumps pure blood to all parts of the body through this aorta. Isn't it? And this blood reaches each and every cells in our body, and the oxygen present in the blood is used for the process of respiration. As a result of respiration, carbon dioxide is produced, and this carbon dioxide gets mixed with blood and the blood becomes deoxygenated or impure blood. Now, this deoxygenated blood is to be oxygenated, and for this deoxygenated blood from all parts of our body is collected by the vena cavas, superior and inferior vena cavas, and carries it to heart or the right auricle. The superior vena cava collects blood from the head and the upper part of the body. Inferior vena cava collects blood from the lower part of the body below the heart. Now this superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava collects the impure blood from all parts of the body, and it is carried into the right auricle. Now the right atrium is filled with blood, deoxygenated blood, and this creates a pressure inside the right atrium, and at that time this tricuspid valve, which is present in between the auricle and the ventricle, opens and the auricle contracts. Now, when the auricle contracts, what happens? This deoxygenated blood through the tricuspid valve enters into the right ventricle. So this contraction of the auricle forces the deoxygenated blood from the right auricle to the right ventricle. Now the right ventricle is filled with blood, and here exerts a pressure, and now the ventricle, the right ventricle contracts, and due to this contraction the semilunar valve present here will open, and the oxygenated blood from the right ventricle enters into the blood vessel called the pulmonary artery. Through this pulmonary artery, the deoxygenated or the impure blood is carried to the lungs, where the blood gets mixed with oxygen. And this deoxygenated blood is now become oxygenated or pure blood in the lungs. And now what happens to this pure blood? This pure blood or the oxygenated blood flows or is carried through the blood vessels and through the pulmonary veins, blood vessels called pulmonary veins, and reaches the left auricle. Okay, so the deoxygenated blood collected in the right auricle, and through the tricuspid valve this deoxygenated blood enters into the right ventricle, and when the ventricle contracts, the deoxygenated blood from the ventricle flows into the pulmonary artery, and through the pulmonary artery it reaches the lungs, and from the lungs the blood gets oxygenated, and this pure blood is carried to the left auricle through the pulmonary vein. Now when the pure blood enters into the left auricle, there creates a pressure, and what happens to the valve? This bicuspid valve will open, and the blood and this auricle, when this auricle contracts, this pure blood enters into the left ventricle. Okay, now what happens is blood to this left ventricle? Now when the left ventricle is filled with blood, there exerts a pressure, and this left ventricle contracts. Now when the left ventricle contracts, what happens? The blood present in the left ventricle enters into another blood vessel called aorta through aortic valve or another semilunar valve. So when the right ventricle and the left ventricle contracts, the blood present inside these ventricles will pass or will flow into the aorta and the pulmonary artery. They will not flow back into the right ventricle or the right auricle or the left auricle. Why? Because the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve present here will not allow the blood to flow back. Now you can observe how blood circulates in the heart in this video. After the pumping of this pure blood through the aorta, all the 4 chambers are now relaxed. Then next it starts the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava collects blood, and this is carried to the right auricle, and at the same time itself pulmonary vein, through pulmonary vein the pure blood is carried to the left ventricle. This happens at the same time, and there exerts a pressure inside the 2 auricles, and due to this the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve opens and the auricles contract. When the auricles contract, the blood from the right auricle and the blood from the left auricle enters into right ventricle and left ventricle. So now the right ventricle is filled with deoxygenated blood and the left ventricle is filled with oxygenated blood. Now immediately there arises a pressure in the left and right ventricles, and the ventricles will contract. This is called as the ventricular systole. Now the impure blood from the right ventricle is pumped to the pulmonary artery, and the pure blood from the left ventricle is pumped to the aorta, and the heart muscles will relax now. So these much events takes place during a heartbeat. A healthy heart beats 72 times in a minute. So that means one heartbeat will occur in seconds. So all these things, all these contraction, relaxation, pumping, all these things happens within a second. By the stethoscope, we can hear the sound of heartbeat as lup dup, lup dup. So the lup dup sound indicates the contraction and relaxation of auricles and ventricles. As the auricles receive blood from the veins without pressure, the wall of the auricles are thin, no? But look here, the wall of the ventricles are thick, isn't it? Why? Because it receives the blood. The ventricles receives the blood from the auricles with a pressure, and the blood is pumped out of the heart at a greater pressure from these ventricles compared to the atria. So the walls of the ventricles are thicker than the walls of the auricles. Okay, did you understand? Okay. So here you can see the diagrammatic representation or the schematic representation of the circulation of blood in our body. Okay, and this is how the blood circulates in our body. You can see the heart. The 4 chambers are drawn here: right auricle, left auricle, right ventricle and left ventricle. Now you can see the blue colored, that is it represents the deoxygenated blood. So the deoxygenated blood from all parts of the body, this is the capillaries present in the body organs, and through these capillaries the deoxygenated blood is collected through the vena cava and it reaches the right auricle or right atrium, and from the right atrium the deoxygenated blood enters into the right ventricle, and from the right ventricle it is carried through the pulmonary artery and to the lungs. So in the lungs there are blood capillaries are there, and here the blood gets oxygenated, and through the capillaries the oxygenated blood is collected and it reaches the pulmonary and it is collected by the pulmonary vein, and through the pulmonary vein the oxygenated blood reaches the left auricle, and from the left auricle it passes into the left ventricle, and when this ventricle contracts the blood enters into the aorta. The aorta is the main blood vessel, main artery, and this aorta carries the oxygenated blood and it will reach each organs through the capillaries in body organs other than lungs. In the cells there are small capillaries, and this deoxygenated blood is collected by this capillaries, and again this vena cava collects the deoxygenated blood from different parts of the body and carries it to right auricle. So one complete circulation occurs now, and this one circulation is known as cardiac cycle. Now see children, in this one circulation or in a cardiac cycle, how many times the blood passes into the heart? Here deoxygenated blood passes into the heart or right auricle. Now the pulmonary artery carries the pure blood and it enters into the left auricle. So 2 times the blood passes or enters into the heart and collected back to the pulmonary artery and the aorta. So 2 times the blood passes into the heart. So this circulation can be called as double circulation. Why it is called as double circulation? In a single circulation or in a single cardiac cycle, the blood passes through the heart twice, and the double circulation has 2 phases. One phase is called as the pulmonary phase or pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation, and the next phase is called as the systemic circulation. Systemic circulation. So 2 circulation takes place here. One is the pulmonary circulation and the other one is the systemic circulation. In the pulmonary circulation, what happens? The pulmonary artery collects the blood from the heart and reaches the lungs, and there in the lungs the blood gets purified, and this oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary vein and reaches the heart. So once the heart receives the blood and takes the blood out. This is one circulation and it is called as the systemic circulation, and this is another circulation associated with the lungs and it is called as the pulmonary circulation. You understood? Okay, so this is the schematic representation of double circulation, and here from this we can understand how the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. This double circulation is made possible in human heart because this human heart is completely divided into 2 halves by a septum that we have already studied the structure of heart. So because of this septum, the human heart is completely divided into 2 halves. No communication is there in between the 2 halves, and one half pumps the deoxygenated blood into the lungs and the other half pumps the oxygenated blood or the pure blood to all parts of the body. So because of this separation of the heart, double circulation is possible in human beings. So one side completely impure blood is there and one side completely pure blood is there. Okay. In case of fishes, single circulation takes place. The fishes are cold-blooded animals and they have 2-chambered heart, one atrium and one ventricle. Atrium receives deoxygenated blood from all parts of the body and passes it to the ventricle. And the ventricle pumps this blood out from the heart to the gills. In the gills, the blood gets oxygenated and distributed to all parts of the body. Next, the circulatory system in amphibians. The amphibians are also cold-blooded organisms. The amphibians and some reptiles have a 3-chambered heart, 2 atria and 1 ventricle. Here, incomplete double circulation takes place in amphibians. The right atria receives deoxygenated blood from the body parts, and the left atrium receives oxygenated blood from gills or lungs or the skin. Both these atrium opens to a single ventricle, and both the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood gets mixed up in the single ventricle, which pumps out as mixed blood. They do not use energy for keeping the body temperature, and their body temperature depends on the temperature of the environment. The birds and mammals have 4-chambered heart to separate the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing up. And this separation provides rich supply of oxygen for organisms that have high energy needs. They are hot-blooded organisms, and they do more physical activities, and to maintain their body temperature they use energy constantly. So they need more oxygen. Children, you might have heard so many people saying high BP, low BP, etc. No? What is this BP? It is blood pressure. See, when we open a water tap at high speed, what happens? The water comes through the hose in a high speed, no? And this water exerts a pressure on the walls of the hose. And if we block the hose, what happens? The hose bursts. Like that, when the heart pumps the blood, it exerts a force against the walls of the blood vessels. And this force or pressure is called as blood pressure. The blood pressure can be measured with the help of an instrument, sphygmomanometer and stethoscope. The pressure in the arteries are greater than the veins. There are two types of pressure, systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. Systolic pressure is the pressure of blood inside the artery when the ventricles contract and pump blood to the aorta. Diastolic pressure is the pressure inside the artery when the ventricles relax. The normal systolic pressure is 120 mm of mercury, and the diastolic pressure is 80 mm of mercury. Here you can observe the process of measuring blood pressure with a sphygmomanometer. In this, there is a mercury scale, a rubber cuff, and rubber tubes attached to the sphygmomanometer. Now first, wrap the upper hand with this rubber cuff, not so tightly or not so loosely. Make the measurement of the mercury level at 0 and fill it with air. When the cuff is fully inflated, the artery is closed and the BP is above 120. When we observe the pulse point near it with the help of a stethoscope, we can hear the sound of heartbeat. When the sound stops, release the air from the cuff. And when the air starts releasing, the blood starts flowing through the artery, and that is the systolic blood pressure. And it measures 120 mm of mercury. And if later when the ventricle relax, the pressure measures below 80, and this is the diastolic pressure. So today we have discussed how heart functions and the double circulation in our body, blood pressure, and the transportation in birds and fishes, etc. I hope you all understood the topics that we have discussed here. Now see the video once more and read the textbook properly. Find out the answers for the given questions and write the notes and study the topics well. The blood circulatory system is over, and in the next video you can study about the lymphatic system in our body. Okay children, thank you.